In my previous speeches, I have discussed changes in the NCAA's transfer rules, including the transfer portal, as well as the creation of NIL, name, image, and likeness deals with college athletes, and how each of these changes can potentially have negative impacts on the athletic programs of schools such as Siena College. The changes in transfer rules allow student athletes to opt out of their agreements with their schools to move on to a preferable situation. NIL deals allow schools with aggressive and wealthy supporters to entice elite players into switching schools. Combined, these changes could not only impact schools like Siena, but could also signal the end of the ability for smaller schools to compete. Let me put this in perspective. In a previous speech, I mentioned the case of Jaden Rashada, a high school quarterback. Rashada was considered the 27th overall recruit in the 2023 high school class. After receiving an NIL deal from Florida's Gator Collective, valued at $13 million, Rashada signed with the Florida Gators. Now consider that in the 2022 NFL Draft, the first quarterback selected was Kenny Pickett. Pickett was chosen with the number 20 overall pick by the Pittsburgh Steelers and would sign a 4-year contract worth just overall $14 million. Think about that. A first-round NFL quarterback gets $14 million. A high school quarterback gets $13 million. So how does Siena measure up? Earlier this year, Saints March On was created as Siena's version of a collective to extend NIL deals to athletes. The immediate goal of Saints March On was to have $100,000 to focus on men's and women's basketball, $100,000 to cover the school's 2 premier teams. The Gator Collective offered $13 million to one player. So how does Siena compete? Unfortunately, under the new system, they can't. Looking at our 2 premier teams, men's and women's basketball, each overachieved. The men's team expected to finish bottom half of the conference and actually held first place for a number of weeks in the middle of the season. But with that success and the overachieving comes attention and vultures. Following the end of the season, 2 of the team's elite players, J.B. McCollum and Jared Billups, entered the transfer portal. McCollum, the team's starting point guard, led the team in scoring, and Billups, another starter, was the team's premier defender. Reports in the Times-Union indicated that McCollum's decision to pursue a transfer was at least in part due to Saints March On's inability to meet his NIL demands. On the women's side, Siena fielded the youngest team in the country this past season. With 9 freshmen and 2 sophomores, the team significantly overachieved expectations. With a year of experience, the team would be expected to challenge for the conference championship next year. But in the current environment, as with the men, success brings losses. Backup point guard Angel Jones and starting forward Amina Slivovic each entered the transfer portal after the conclusion of the season. So how do programs like Siena build consistent winning teams when success jeopardizes their hold on star players? And this is not a problem exclusive to Siena. Florida Atlantic University made their first appearance in the Final Four just a few weeks ago. The surprising regional winner found themselves on the defensive when head coach Dusty May claimed people were messing with his players. May said middlemen were offering incentives to his players to enter the transfer portal and ultimately move on to other schools. So, what's the solution? Is there a solution? In the long run, under the current rules, the simple fact is the ability of smaller schools to compete and build successful programs will cease to exist. Any attempt by the NCAA to limit transfers will ultimately be faced with legal challenges. In addition, any attempts to limit NIL deals for players would also face legal hurdles that the NCAA would most likely lose. One option is for smaller schools to build collectives to compete with larger institutions. This would be a positive in both recruiting and retention of players. Unfortunately, without mega wealthy alumni like the University of Miami has, this is not a realistic option. In professional sports, the teams operate as partnerships and deal with the players represented by unions. Through collective bargaining, things like salary caps and rookie wage scales are mutually agreed to. For the 300-plus NCAA member institutions to obtain similar wage limitations, a collective bargaining unit representing the thousands of collegiate athletes would have to be created. Remember, professional sports leagues have around 30 teams and maybe 1,500 players. The numbers are far more manageable than organizing the college sports landscape. Another option would be for the division of the NCAA with the Power 5 conferences creating their own high-revenue organization featuring football and basketball and leaving the remaining conferences to pursue a more traditional student-athlete model where the education value of the athletic scholarship isn't the primary compensation. Even under a divided system like this, smaller schools will remain at risk as players they discover and develop are pirated by programs with greater resources. March Madness has earned its name from the unpredictable nature of the men's basketball tournament, where small schools routinely knock off their more prestigious rivals. Anyone who enjoys the tournament should embrace it now, because under the recent rule changes and current environment, the madness may soon be gone. Thank you.